So did Susan tell you Bob's wife disappeared?
No, it's just that she had done something, and then she did. You know, as time went by, she did, but not.
What do you remember her saying eventually?
She called me on the phone, and I remember she asked me to come up to her apartment.
This is a never-before-heard interview between filmmaker Andrew Jarecki and one of Susan Berman's friends, Miriam Barnes. Miriam tells Andrew that in early February 1982, she got a call from Susan asking her to come over.
There wasn't a lot of lights on. It was kind of darkish. And she was it was strange to be told to sit down on a chair in the middle of the foyer. But Susan was strange, so it was okay.
They sat together in the darkened foyer of Susan's apartment in New York City. Miriam says that Susan was agitated, nervous, and picking at her lip.
And she said, don't ask me any questions. I'm just going to tell you something. I did something today. I did something I shouldn't have done. If anything ever happens to me, Bobby did it.
Hi, I'm Zach Stewart-Pontier, one of the filmmakers behind HBO's The Jinx. Welcome back to the official Jinx podcast, a show where we take you behind the scenes of Andrew Jarecki's documentary series that became a real-life murder investigation. Chapter 9, Saving My Tears Till It's Official, was just released on Max. The trial begins, and the prosecution lays out the case that Susan Berman was murdered because she was involved in the cover-up of Kathie Durst's disappearance. And Bob and his high-profile defense team do their best to knock it all down. Today on the podcast, we explore how the prosecution used the material from the Jinx in the trial. We meet Susan Berman's sweetheart of a hairdresser, and Andrew breaks down his thoughts on the incriminating phone call with Susan Berman just 9 days after Kathie's disappearance. Andrew and I got into the studio to chat. So, do you remember the lead up to the trial? Do you remember watching it and following it?
I remember following the preliminary testimony, the witnesses that they brought in before the trial was going to start. And that's kind of what got you and me interested in making more episodes. And then we started really tracking the trial and actually downloading stuff. And we sent somebody to the courthouse and we started to gather all that information because we thought we might need it for something.
In the early days of the court case, Andrew and I didn't know what we were going to do. But we were watching as Bob's defense team attempted to use the Jinx to their advantage. Here's Dick DeGuerin on the news casting doubt on the timing of Bob's arrest.
Defense attorney Dick DeGuerin, he joins us now. Good morning to you, sir.
The prosecutors jumped the gun because of the Jinx. You know, it's all in the editing. The editing was designed for good television, but it wasn't designed to get to the truth.
The Jinx would have a role inside the courtroom as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what the evidence is going to show in this case. It's been long and it's complicated.
In Chapter 9 of the TV show, John Lewin's opening statement is focused on the backstory and how Susan Berman's murder related to Kathie Durst's disappearance. But in actuality, Lewin's opening statement was days long, and looming large through a bunch of it was the Jinx interview with Robert Durst.
So the first thing is, we're going to go back and we're going to talk about what we expect the evidence to show. This is the interview with Andrew Jarecki and Mark Smerling.
I asked Eugene Miata, one of Lewin's deputies, about this.
What was the role of the Jinx in the trial in the end?
We were very careful of saying that we didn't use the Jinx in our trial because we never called it the Jinx. There were Mark and Andrew interviews. And because of that, there was a difference. So the Jinx played no role in our trial, but the unedited footage was a huge part of our case.
Any ideas or statements about what happened in the Jinx or what was shown in the Jinx? What's important, what the evidence will show, is that what you're seeing is the original unedited video.
Andrew, Mark, and I were on the witness list, and Andrew says he expected that he would have to testify.
I think I knew from the minute that we had found the evidence, from the minute that I had confronted Bob with it, that there were going to be a lot of questions swirling about how did you get the evidence? Did you show it to Bob? When did you show it to Bob? Were you actually in cahoots with the police at that time? And therefore, you shouldn't have interviewed him without saying that you were an agent of law enforcement. And all that stuff was going to need to be explained. And so the LADA, John Lewin, had said to me, be prepared to testify at the trial.
Andrew Jarecki and Mark Smerling, they are filmmakers, and we're partners in a production company called Hit the Ground Running. They're going to testify. You're going to hear from them.
It doesn't exactly play out like that, but more on that later. In his opening, Lewin also spent a lot of time talking about Susan Berman and what she was really like as a person.
So, who was Susan Berman? Susan was loyal. Now, although Susan was very loyal to her friends, she could also be highly manipulative. And it's that manipulation that got her killed.
Lewin and his team start to call witnesses who knew Susan. One of the first to be called is Susan's old friend, Steven Silverman. He was actually featured in part 1 of the Jinx.
Please state and spell your first and last name.
Stephen, S-T-E-P-H-E-N, Silverman.
And if I were to ask you to describe, what was Susan's personality like? How would you describe it?
It was many things, not all of them flattering. She was very abrasive.
Lewin asks Silverman, on a scale of 1 to 100, which is one of Lewin's favorite phrases, how high maintenance of a friend was Susan Burman?
Susan would score a perfect 100. Once you were in her circle, you were trapped. You could not escape.
Is there a connection between Susan Berman and phobia?
Yes, when you would go to a restaurant with her, the waiter would no sooner say his name than she would list every allergy she had. She couldn't do elevations, which is why when I moved away, I moved to the 24th floor.
And that was because you knew that if you were at a high floor,
I was safe.
Silverman is saying that because he moved to a high floor, he was safe from Susan. But not everybody felt this way about her friendship. Andrew talked to Miriam Barnes, who you met at the top of the show.
Who was Susan Berman? She was this very ebullient woman who we met in the laundry room on Beekman Place in our little townhouse. And they were all studios. And she loved the fact that I would call it Mr. Baird, that's the gentleman who owned it, Mr. Baird's home for naughty boys and girls, because we were all single.
What were her relationships with men like?
Not great. She didn't have great relationships with men, as far as I knew. Paul was the longest relationship, and she was carrying him.
Paul is Paul Kaufman, Susan Berman's ex-boyfriend, who was actually called as a witness during the trial.
Please state and spell your first and last name.
Paul Kaufman, P-A-U-L-K-A-U-F-M-A-N.
Thank you.
When did you meet Susan?
Well, we knew each other actually from junior high school, but then we didn't see each other for many years, and we were reintroduced to each other in the 80s.
And after you reconnected with her in the mid-80s, did you develop a relationship with her?
Well, yes, we did.
Okay. And did you develop a romantic
Yes,
relationship?
we did.
Do you have any children?
I have two,
What are their names?
Sarah and Mella.
Paul, Sarah, and Mella all moved in with Susan. For a while, they were a happy family. You'll remember Sarah from part 1 as the guy who found the envelope with the infamous Beverly misspelling. In the trial, he was not called to testify. But his sister Mella was. Here's Habib Balian, Lewin's second in command.
Mella, in my mind, was extremely important in kind of explaining what Susan was really like and humanizing her a little bit. I think Mela was extremely credible because she wasn't just out there painting Susan as some saint, right? She was saying it like it was, and she was exposing Susan for who she was, like warts and all, good qualities and bad qualities. Around how old were you when you came home and here's Susan Berman in your life?
6th grade, middle of the year, probably 11. I would say probably within 6 to 8 months, we had become incredibly close. And it was not long after that that she was very clear in her conversation with me that she would never disappoint me or abandon me like my other parents had.
She said that to you?
Yeah. We did homework together. We sat at the kitchen table and talked endlessly. We went out to dinner together. We went to yoga. She would read all sorts of books and hand them on to me. We'd watch series and movies together. It all had a depth of sweetness and love and then extreme entertainment.
Mela participated in part 1 of the Jinx. Very little of the interview was used in the actual show. But in it, Mela says her relationship with Susan was complicated.
My life was about being her apprentice / daughter / confidant / therapist. I mean, she had that kind of like enmeshment, fusing neediness where it's like she would have crawled up inside me if she could have. It's just like there was no getting enough. Her life was about power. So there was a panic-driven daily obsession with power moves over every little thing, the valet who parked the car, to the best friend who's doing a favor, to whomever she wants to represent her or buy her script or do whatever.
But Mela's testimony wasn't just character building. She also had evidence.
Did Susan ever talk to you about any situations involving any friends she had whose wives had gone missing?
Yes.
She did?
Yes.
Okay. How old were you approximately when this conversation took place?
12 or 13 in there. Probably 13, 14, actually.
Okay. What was the context under which this discussion came up between you and Susan, to the best of your memory?
We went to the UCLA library to research a feminist interpretation of the Bible for my English class. And when we were leaving, I believe, we were on Sunset, and she was, it was just another interesting story she was telling me, and she was telling me about her friend and how his wife had disappeared and how she had been an alibi or made a phone call for him so that it wasn't suspicious. And she left it kind of like a cliffhanger. She left me in suspense, like, did he do it? And she kind of smirked and said, I don't know, what do you think, kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Paul Kaufman also testified that Susan had talked to him about Kathie Durst's disappearance.
Did Susan ever discuss with you Robert Durst's missing wife?
She did.
Okay. When did you have this discussion with her?
We had this discussion once. It was on the plane going to New York when I was going to be meeting him for the first time.
And when you say him,
Mr. Durst.
what did Susan tell you about Robert Durst's missing wife?
Well, we were talking about scripts in regard to murder scripts and mobster ideas and people that had done things, etc. And in the course of that conversation, she mentioned to me, she said, by the way, Mr. Durst killed his wife. And that is what she said to me.
Paul says Susan told him, by the way, Mr. Durst killed his wife.
Do you recall telling detectives that Susan said that Mr. Durst's wife was a beautiful woman, was attending middle school, and that she was going to leave him? And that he flipped out, but didn't mean to do it?
Maybe she did say that. Yeah, she might have said that.
Around this time, Paul and Susan's relationship started to fall apart, and Mela testified that she and her brother Sarab had a choice as to who they would live with.
When Susan came back from New York and they had had a fight, I remember we were sitting in the park and the dogs were running around, and before she could even really get it out, I said, well, obviously I'm staying with you, which, you know, she was pretty thrilled about and tearful. And
What was her demeanor when you told her, you know what, I want to stay with you?
she was touched.
Both Mela and Sarab left their father and moved in with Susan.
She wanted a relationship and she wanted children. But I did his hair and the kids' hair, and she paid for everything. But she loved the kids, who were young, you know, teenagers.
This is David Eisenman, Susan's longtime hairdresser and close friend. He didn't make it into part 2, but he spoke to us, and he remembers Susan fondly.
So what do you have there, David?
She dedicated it to me when I started doing her hair. Dear David, even though I don't know you too well, I perceive an intelligence and a sensitivity in you that I really appreciate.
We're in David's home in Palm Springs, and he's showing off his personalized copy of Easy Street. He flips it over and points to Susan's headshot.
It's her famous Susan Burman haircut. It was jet black and bangs like Cleopatra. And she had very pale, it worked. I mean, very few people can wear black hair, but Susan could wear it, and it was very attractive.
David was also called as a witness during the trial.
When they asked you to be a witness, what went through your mind?
I was happy that something is going to get resolved, and I wanted to see justice done.
Did you have a client named Susan Berman?
Yes.
Financially, was she able to pay for her styling and her haircut?
There came a point where she could not pay me, but I told her not to worry, that when she got up on her feet and was working again, she could start paying me again.
What was it like negotiating this idea that she could no longer pay you? Was she embarrassed about that?
I always said not to worry, and but the problem was I started having to do black henna on her head, which takes hours to do. And if she was in a good mood, great. But if she was in a bad mood, she was very quiet, but she could snap on you in an instant.
By the end, Susan owed so many people money that she kept a list. And to Andrew, that says a lot about who she was.
If she never intended to pay those people back, she wouldn't have kept a list. So she wanted to pay them back. She never was going to pay them back, but in her mind, she saw herself as the kind of person that would pay them back. You know, she wasn't a person without love.
David testified that Susan told him she was waiting for money from a friend.
Did you remember her telling you that the money wasn't coming fast enough from Bobby?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, and that was in this last discussion you had with her?
Yes.
And when she was saying that, the money's not coming fast enough from Bobby, what was her demeanor like? Was it normal? Was it different?
The laughs were gone. I mean, I could tell she was under a lot of stress, and she was very upset, and she didn't know where she was going to get her rent money. And
did you notice any change in the way she spoke about Bobby at that point in time, your last time you spoke with her?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe for the jury, please, what that change in her attitude was towards Bobby?
She was becoming more desperate in that she couldn't get in touch with him. I mean, I could tell she was under a lot of stress.
Did Susan tell you in this discussion about not getting this money and this check what she was afraid was going to happen to her?
She referred to herself as destitute, and she was afraid of becoming a street person.
Almost everyone who knew Susan at the end of her life described her this way: destitute, desperate, living in fear. Her life had taken a major turn. Here's Susan's friend and Hollywood producer, Linda Obst.
She was always very needy. And she was needy when I knew her. And then I understand and see that she was much more needy at the end. She had less money. When you suddenly get the picture that you're not going to sell screenplays anymore. And when she got that, she's a survivor. She was her father's daughter. And she had to do what she had to do.
Steven Silverman testified that Susan would never blackmail someone overtly.
No, Susan was too clever to do anything overtly.
And can you tell me what you mean by that?
She would find other ways. She would hint that she had something on you.
There's a letter from Susan to Bob that was discovered on her computer after she was murdered. It's dated November of the year 2000. She died in December. We don't know if she ever sent it. She writes, "Dearest Bobby, I just wanted you to know how much I appreciated the 2 times you helped me and what a wonderful friend you've been, like the brother I never had over the 30-odd years. I'm so sorry I had to ask you that last time, and ever, Bobby. You know that our friendship was never about money. I'm so sorry that I've been struggling these last few years, and I hope to see you someday again. I don't want my last request to be the last time we communicate. Our friendship means so much to me, Bobby. I hope you forgive me for not keeping pace with your more successful life. I'm still hoping to turn everything around so that I'll be able to repay you." And then she ends, "I hope I haven't disappointed you as a friend, Bobby. All love and gratitude for your friendship over the years."
So what did she do in the end? Who knows, but probably, she said something to Bob about the idea that maybe the police wanted to talk to her and maybe she was thinking about talking to the police.
Andrew and Bob talked about this in the first interview for the Jinx.
She said, "Bobby, it's going to be best for both of us if I just talk to them. But the police want to talk to me, I'm just going to talk to them. Is that all right?" And like that was the conversation. Do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. And that was unforgivable, right? From Bob's standpoint. If she's his most loyal friend, now she's thinking about talking to the police, which is, the whole thing is such a prism, right? She actually wasn't thinking about talking to the police, but she told Bob she was.
And Susan potentially talking to the police also came up in Lewin and Bob's New Orleans interview.
Susan told me that she'd been contacted by Los Angeles detectives and New York detectives, and they want to come talk to me.
I'm gonna tell you something. That wasn't true. They had not contacted her. They were planning on contacting her. They had never contacted her.
I did not know that they had not contacted
her. So what I'm telling you is, Susan lied to you about that.
Whatever Susan said to Bob, clearly he felt threatened. And Andrew believes betrayed.
What he's thinking is, this person that I've looked after for all these years is thinking about destroying my life? I don't think he felt bad about killing her. I think he went in there thinking, well, it's her or me. And that's kind of what he says to Nick Chavin. It was her or me. I had no choice.
There's always been a question of what Susan knew about Kathie's disappearance. It's a question we never thought we'd be able to answer. But during the course of the trial in Los Angeles, a tape was discovered. It's covered extensively in Chapter 9, the Goldman tape.
Can you imagine the two of them, Albert Goldman and Susan Berman, on the phone?
Albert Goldman was an investigative reporter who'd written biographies about John Lennon and Elvis. After his death, his archives were donated to Columbia University. This included written notes and recorded phone calls. One of these calls was between him and Susan Berman, 9 days after Kathie Durst's disappearance.
this is what I'm calling to ask you, because you're like the smartest person I know. The story is a crazy story, but basically I want to know if I've covered all the ends. I've been on the street myself interviewing people. You know, I've been in charge of all the media.
The whole tone of the conversation is so manipulative because he's sort of in the food chain of journalists in New York. He's a couple rungs above her. And so she just starts shamelessly flattering him.
Okay, just bear with me because you're really smart. You know what I mean? And maybe you'll think of something I haven't.
She's so excited to be telling this story that she starts it and restarts it and restarts it. She keeps saying, oh, this is a crazy story.
I tell you, Albert, it's the most bizarre story you've ever heard. I'll tell you very briefly. I don't want to bore you to death.
But, you know, I want to tell you the story. Here I go. I'm telling you the story.
Okay, dig this. And the story gets more bizarre every day.
Well, where was she supposed to be?
Okay, here's the story, okay? Now, this is why the story gets a little weird.
Now, it's really a crazy story. I can't wait to tell you the story. Okay, so here's the story.
I'm going to tell you the story, okay? That's it. You got the story, okay?
Part of what she does is, you know, I don't know, the worst caricature of Hollywood storytelling is everybody in the story has to be gorgeous. They all have to be richer than God. They all have to be so intriguing and brilliant. And she kind of sets the story up by saying, you know, these are my two best friends in the world.
These are my two best friends in the world. She's a 29-year-old medical school student, absolutely gorgeous.
Not true, right? She wasn't best friends with Kathie at all, but the story works better if Susan is talking about her two best friends. That means Susan's got access with a capital A, so you've got to get into it with her. You need to trust her. She starts talking immediately about money.
Just to make it very brief, her husband at first didn't want to notify the police because he thought it was a kidnap attempt because about 6 months ago, New York Magazine did a cover story on the Durst, and they estimated their fortune at $500 million, right? They just bought a $500,000 penthouse.
So again, it's the ultra aspect of the story. You've got to make it bigger and better than it really is.
Personally, between you and me, Albert, and never to be quoted, okay?
Yeah.
I think she's dead.
I think so, too.
Yeah, I think she was kidnapped. She was a beautiful girl. Like when she was 14 years old, she was 17 Magazine's Girl of the Year. You know, no makeup, absolutely gorgeous.
That is a total fabrication. So for Susan to say she was 17 Magazine's Girl of the Year, like, again, that's gratuitous, right? She didn't have to say that for people to be concerned about her, but she wanted it to be a bigger deal.
I told you, it's this huge Durst empire. The father's into wealth maintenance, Albert. Okay.
Yeah.
So he says, oh, she's a runaway wife. Well, dig this. First of all, Kathie's not a calculating Jewish girl who would know how to run away. I knew her intimately. He had cut off all her charge cards before when they were going to get a divorce, before the reconciliation. There was no activity on her checking account. She could not go anywhere, you know.
Nah, she didn't run.
Yeah. So I said, Bobby, she didn't run away. I said, call the police. So he calls the police. Okay. It's reported officially Thursday.
It's clear to Susan, she's smart enough to know that if your best friend's wife is missing and it takes you 5 days to report her missing, you got a problem.
Now people are starting to take him seriously. You know what I mean? He's like literally hysterical. Okay, so they decide 200 police searched the penthouse at Riverside Drive building because it's a non-eviction policy in that building.
The penthouse is like a little tiny penthouse. You couldn't fit 200 people in 20 of these penthouses. But the idea that the police ever send 200 people to do anything is nonsense. And so she starts talking about things like bloodhounds.
Now, of course, the police are with the bloodhounds, you can imagine.
It's totally made up. It's just, there's no evidence for any of that.
I mean, what's so powerful about this tape in a lot of ways is that you can see this in the news.
Yeah.
You can watch her words, you know, and in the show, we're focused on the diamond earrings aspect. But there's many other little pieces that she says that then later end up in the news. First and foremost, that the doorman saw her.
Okay, came back Sunday night. She was a little bit drunk. She drinks. And, you know, went to her. They have a penthouse on Riverside Drive, 37 Riverside Drive. Okay, the doorman saw her go in at 11:40. She called Bobby, says she's home safely. Okay.
This whole idea that Kathie got back to the city is planted in this.
Yeah.
From all sources. The last time she was seen alive was noon Monday, which is 10 days ago. Monday morning, she called into Einstein, said she didn't feel good, and she was going to work. Okay? Okay.
It's kind of a stroke of Bob-like genius to disappear your wife in Westchester and report her missing in another jurisdiction. And more people start picking up on it. And then nobody really did go back to the question of whether she ever made it to the city to begin with.
Yeah, but it's not a kidnap, Albert.
No, it's not a kidnap, obviously.
Right? Because wouldn't they know in 10 days? So anyway.
Oh, in 10 days, they know in 10 minutes.
Then there's this whole other thing she keeps doing, which is even though she's saying Kathie was this beautiful, incredible person and her best friend, she just starts trashing her.
Kathie did coke, and she wrote her own scripts. Okay, the police think they found her coke dealer and they have him staked out. Now, the coke dealer, I don't know him, but Bobby does. He's like, an upper middle class guy. They have the
coke dealer.
It's not, is it? No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
The last thing in the world anybody in drugs does is hit the customer. I mean,
if you can make the press, Albert Goldman included, believe that she was sort of a trashy person, that she was kind of a low person. Now she's really explaining that Kathie is not worth looking for.
Monday morning, she called into Einstein, said she didn't feel good, and she was staying home. Now, she definitely would have showed up Tuesday. She would never have missed 2 days because she was obsessed by graduating from medical school, and she was not doing that well. She's from this dumb Irish Catholic family, like poor, like all the sisters are married to firemen. I'm one of the only smart friends. She had about 5 friends. I was one of them.
Listen, of course I loved her, but, if any readers are reading this, you can fairly quickly realize this is a person that probably got herself into trouble.
She dresses like I do. The only difference is she had diamond earrings on, okay? Okay, so she's looks wealthy because she's so pretty, Okay, that's the last anyone heard from her. Monday night, Bobby...
Do you think that's literally true that she had diamond earrings?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, man, there's your answer right there.
Well, there's your answer right there. Diamond earrings, and she's like, oh, that worked? Okay, great.
That's what Bobby says, but I mean, she had diamond stud earrings on, that he'd given her, and he always was telling her don't wear them.
Now, the diamond earrings are kind of a masterstroke because it's totally made up, right? The earrings were actually found in the apartment, so there's no chance that Kathie was wearing diamond earrings at the time. There's a whole other perverse aspect to it, which is that she's telling it to him in a way that is so florid and so exciting and so edge of your seat that you can tell she's just hoping that Goldman's going to say, I don't know if you've noticed, but this is quite a story you've stepped into, Susan. And she would say, I didn't even think of that, Albert. So I would be the person to write this story? You can feel her looking for that. She's trying to get somebody to say, Susan, you're going to be the star of the story going forward.
It wasn't a kidnap. It wasn't anything.
You're right, Albert, aren't you?
A vulnerable-looking broad with obviously authentic earrings. They snatch her off the street. They take her somewhere. No, it's a simple grab,
kill,
rob, rape, kill, dump. So they took her up somewhere, tossed her in the river, and the body will be found coming to the surface, hideously bloated with gas, blah, blah, blah. That'll be the punchline.
Hideously bloated with gas. That'll be the punchline.
I mean, it's really dark, She's told him this burlesque tabloid story, and he kind of responds by being like, yeah, hideously bloated with gas. That's a horrible headline that you've read in the New York Post or something like that. And then, of course, the classic...
She's dead, right? I'm saving my tears till it's official, but you think so?
Such a chilling line, right? I'm saving my tears till it's official. That's such a disappointing line to hear someone say. It's sort of like she realizes she's deep into the call and she's sounding ghoulish. She's giving this very negative impression of Kathie, and then at some point she sort of hears herself and she thinks, all right, Susan, let's clean it up a little bit. You're sounding a little too harsh on this missing girl. And so she says, kind of offhandedly, yeah, I'm saving my tears till it's official. What's she doing? She's apologizing for the fact that she's not sounding sad, right? That's a big problem in her story. When I say this changed my perception of something I've been looking at for 17 years, it's not just that I understood Susan was participating in manipulating Bob. It's that I really started to see her as a person that was missing a kind of a central morality. I just realized that she was sort of willing to say or do anything, which may have been why Bob was close to her in a way, This is a moment for Susan to step out, and who knows, maybe that makes Bob fall in love with her again, in the way that she had once hoped that he would.
That's what turned her on was the idea that he needed her and she could come up with the stuff. She could be vital to him.
Here's Susan's friend and Hollywood producer Linda Obst again. She says she can imagine Susan taking the lead in Bob's crisis.
Don't you worry about it. I'll take care of it. And also, it's more intimate with him than anybody else will be with him. They are improvising this lie together. It's a life and death situation. They're tied to each other like they have children. This ties them together forever.
You don't need to know how to do this, Bob. This is where I come in. Right? This is the closest she's going to get to having sex with Bob Durst.
That's exactly right. This is having sex with Bob Durst for her.
And it's like the rapture. The
yeah,
level.
She does sound like she's having sex. It's pathological.
That's a grandiosity.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't surprise me. And the irony, that's what I keep thinking, that I should have just said to her, he's going to kill you someday, so stop loving him like that. Stop idolizing him. I should have known. Because the second she was gone, I knew.
It seemed like Susan herself may have known what fate awaited her. As part of an A&E special about Las Vegas, Susan is interviewed late in her life. She's older, but she still has jet black hair. Thank you, David. And she's speaking a mile a minute.
My dad was Davy Berman. He was one of the pioneers, mobster, gangsters, whatever you want to basically say, that founded Las Vegas.
But toward the end of the interview, she starts reflecting on the choices she's made.
I think the goal of life, this blessed gift that we all struggle with, is to somehow, as we get older and we mature, make more and more good choices. Choices that are good for us, choices that are good for our family, choices that are good for humanity. Sometimes I think life forces you into choices, and it's a tragic thing because that past could erase your present. Remember, you're in charge of you.
Next time on the official Jinx podcast, a bombshell moment in court that changes everything.
The electricity in that room. I still get chills thinking about it.
The official Jinx podcast is hosted by me, Zach Stewart Pontier. It's produced by ZSP Media and Hit the Ground Running Films with HBO. Watch episodes of The Jinx and stream The Jinx Part 2 on Max. This episode was produced by Naomi Bronner. The rest of our team is Laura Newcomb, Ethan Oberman, and Ramoy Phillip. The supervising producer is Liz Stiles. Mixing and engineering by Sam Baer. It was recorded by Brett Tubin at Relic Room in New York City. Music by the Mondo Boys, Wes Dylan Thornton, and John Cusiak. Additional music courtesy of HBO. The executive producers are Andrew Jarecki and me, Zach Stewart Pontier. Special thanks to Michael Gluckstadt, Ali Cohen, Aaron Kelly, and Savon Slater at HBO Podcasts, and the fabulous Jinx team. Sam Neve, Kyle Martin, Richard Henkin, Charlotte Kaufman, Susan Lazarus, Annabelle White, Pedro Vital, Jesse Herman, Michele Zabarfian, and Nako Narder. And thanks to Ro Dillon, George Vogel, Charlie Wessler, Nancy Jarecki, and Emily Wiedemann. And you. Thank you for listening and making it all the way through the credits. Here's Bob talking to Debbie about some of his press clippings from prison.
You're in the papers again today. You with me?
I'm with you. Can you read it, or is it...
So, ready? I'll give you the title.
Oh, okay. And it's on what page?
9.
And it's how much of the page?
Almost the whole thing, but not the
Almost the whole page? Any pictures?
Yes, pictures of you, now, pictures of you and Kathie 100 years ago, and a picture of Susan Burman. Okay, let me just read the headline. Blaine Durst's pal had big news.
Okay, but I didn't understand the first word.
Blaine.
Spell it.
S-L-A-I-N.
F-L...
S, Sam.
Sam.
S-L.
Blaine, got it.